get a lot of questions about posing people and what works, especially just because I do a lot of group shots. Typically for me, when I'm given a big band to work with of about 5 guys, there's a couple of things going on in my mind. The first thing is where I put the main light, because that affects everybody and that has to hit everybody, just because I only like to use one main light. So basically I first kind of say, okay, this is your general area, can you stand around here? And then I don't like them standing all in a row. So working with that row, I just simply put some in front, some in behind. So it just gives a little bit of dimension to it. And what I'm talking about sounds like really simple, like, well, duh. But just simply putting them in that basic formation at first, right? And then you give it some time. Because if you say, okay, I'm taking a picture now, they'll just look really, really stiff if they're not experienced models and they haven't done photo shoots before. So I give it some time. I put them there. I just kind of go to switch a lens, or I go to say something, and all of a sudden they relax and they look at how they're actually going to look standing there, because they're just talking to each other. And I say, okay, everyone freeze. And that's usually the shot, with, of course, a few minor tweaks. Sometimes if I have a band spread out of 5 members, the guys on both ends, just to lead the eye into the photo, what I'll do is I'll have them just turn one shoulder toward the camera, and the guy on the other side of the camera will have the opposite shoulder turned toward the camera. So it just gives a little bit of direction to the camera. And it's really hard to pose a large group, especially because they all have to be looking, they can't all be blinking. So a lot of the times clients will ask that you swap heads from shot to shot, which is a big pain. But I mean, if that's what pleases the client, then that's what you have to do. In terms of posing, if you find somebody is giving you a really, really rugged stance and you just don't know what to do, a little trick that I know is I simply just get them to put one foot behind the other one and then put their weight on that back foot. And what that's going to do is just change the dimension of their body. It's going to shift their shoulders a little bit, shift their posture, and they're going to look a lot more natural standing there than simply just like both legs straight, because nobody really stands like that. My personal choice when it comes to lenses is I actually prefer using fixed prime lenses, which means that they don't zoom. This is for a lot of reasons, but I mean the main one is just because they're built to the only one focal length. So they're not built to zoom around, so they're just made specifically sharp at the focal length that they are. So if it's a 50mm lens, it's built to be 50mm. So it ends up being a lot sharper, the clarity is a lot better, and there's a lot better color. Also, typically prime lenses, they have a lot larger apertures. So this lens, for example, the 50mm can go all the way to 1.2, so it's a lot better shooting in low light. It also gives a nice kind of creamy background blur behind the subject. The other reason is because you're kind of forced to move around with a prime lens instead of a zoom lens. I find with the zoom lens, I just stay in one spot and kind of zoom around. And with a prime lens, I'm able to get a little bit more creative and move around. And then when I move around, I find, oh, this angle works better, or this is a cool viewpoint, or this guy's doing this when I move here. So it just kind of gets me on my feet a little bit more and gets me a little bit more involved. But I've definitely used zoom lenses quite a bit in my work, and I have no problem with them, but I just prefer prime lenses. Lens choice also plays a significant role in how the photo looks, because obviously when you use a wide-angle lens, it shrinks the background basically, versus if you were to take a picture of a man standing somewhere with a wide-angle lens, okay, the background elements would appear small. But if you used a 85mm lens and then moved back so you were getting the same composition with the subject in the photo, the background would actually be enlarged. So sometimes if I feel like I want to isolate the subject from the background a bit and there's too many background elements going on, I'll just simply throw on a really, really long lens, like an 85 or 50, stand farther back, and what that does is it just projects and expands the whole background, so it ends up becoming a lot easier to make out the subject. On my portraits, I like to use either a 50mm lens, but I find that when I go a little bit too close, the face distorts a little bit. So typically when I'm up close, I only use lenses that are 85mm and higher. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be talking a lot about all the fancy equipment that I use, all the Profoto lights and, the Phase 1 and all that stuff. But I just like to make a little disclaimer to say that basically I started out working commercially doing stuff with a point and shoot. And I feel that having good equipment obviously helps you and makes things a lot easier, but it in no way determines you to be a good photographer or a bad photographer. What is important is the eye behind the camera and not the camera itself. But I mean, when it comes down to it, a 22 megapixel image is going to look better than a 1.4 megapixel image. It's just the way it is. But for people starting out, I really suggest you just focus less on all that technical stuff and just focus more on getting good shots with what you have, because it's possible. I also talk a lot about all the fancy strobes that I use, the flashes, all my Profoto stuff. But in no means do you have to start out with this expensive gear. There's a lot of cheap stuff out there like Alien Bees, which work great, and speed lights are pretty cheap as well, and they're a good starting point to learn. Even if you have no lights at all, even knowing how to set up lights and knowing what a main light is and a rim light is going to help you with no lights at all, because you're going to start looking at the scene differently. You're going to start placing people differently in a scene. Even if you just have a window light to work with, you know that that's your main light, and maybe you can add a piece of cardboard behind them as a reflector for a rim light. Just knowing all the different positions of lights and where to put them is going to help you look at the world different when you're photographing. When I walk downtown, for example, and the sun is low and it's reflecting off all the metallic buildings, I know that that's my main light. So if it's reflecting off the metallic building and they're standing there, then I have a light on their face, and I also have a rim light from behind, which is not the reflection, but it's just the real sun. I got a question a few times asking about how you get this nice shine on black skin, like my pictures from Ethiopia. The answer to that question is actually really simple. Because the people have such beautiful dark skin, and because it's so hot and they're sweating there, the sweat actually reflects the white wall of my softbox, basically. So black skin itself already has so much contrast to it that you can actually, when you're using a really high powered light, you get such a variation between highlight, midtone, and shadow that the skin actually glows white where the light is hitting it the most, and just does like a really nice gradation to black. So I mean, it's not really my doing at all. It's just the people there have amazing skin, and it's amazing to photograph. To me, my biggest hobby is actually travel, and it's not photography. I love traveling the world, meeting interesting people, and having interesting experiences. That's the thing that I look forward to most. But it goes hand in hand with my job, because when I'm around somewhere trying to get photos, it makes me push deeper than the surface, because I'm trying to get that good photo. So it allows me to investigate more, ask more questions, learn about what it is that I'm photographing. And I can tell you that pretty much all the interesting stories of the things that are happening to me when I travel is because I was looking for a picture. I feel like if I just kept up doing only commercial work, musician after musician, TV show after TV show, I'm always happy to get that work, and don't get me wrong, like I love working, I love photographing, that kind of stuff, but it's not really where my heart is. I prefer my own personal travel work. So to me, my life is a balance between commercial jobs and getting money, and personal work and blowing all that money that I made doing my commercial work. And one day I actually I hope to get enough personal work to build up a library of stuff so I can just stop doing commercial work and just focus on my personal work. So that's my long-term goal. So to me, the balance is I cannot stay in one place I cannot stay in New York for longer than a few months. I just get too claustrophobic. I stop shooting for myself. I just only do money jobs. You know, it's very unhealthy to not have that break in terms of feeling artistically drained. So to me, the perfect balance that I can do is do a commercial job and do a personal trip. Commercial job, personal trip. Personal trips makes me sick of traveling, and I never want to travel again after the places that I've been. And then a week later I get that bug again, and it's just a vicious cycle, but it keeps me sane.